Sometimes it is actually more dramatic not to have a sequence hymn between the second reading and the gospel. Because this morning, because we read them in sequence, it was very easy to see Jesus in Luke's gospel refuting Paul's wishful thinking about immediate cause and effect. And think about it. The world would be so much easier if we knew that every bad thing that happened to people happened because the people sinned. If someone was bit by a poisonous snake, it was because they put Jesus to the test. If someone is struck down in the wilderness, we know it is because they committed adultery and deserved it. And there is nothing that insulates us better from life's vicissitude than the idea that they only happen to the deserving. And in Luke's gospel comes along and says, well, do you think that those people whose blood got mixed up in the sacrifice were worse than you? Think again. Or that tower that fell. Do you think those people had a tower fall on them because they were sinful? Think again. Think again. Life is more complicated and more nuanced than we think it is. And God that we meet in Exodus translates as I am who I am, or I cause to be what I cause to be, or in the vernacular, it is what it is. And that is what Jesus is telling us. Now, historically, Luke was written after all the letters of Paul. And the letters of Paul were all written before the Romans came and destroyed Jerusalem and destroyed the Jewish people. So there was still hope that Jesus was going to come back and make all things right. By the time Luke was written, all things had not been made right. And lots of innocent people had died. And so Luke puts in the mouth of Jesus, or we remember from the mouth of Jesus, that he says, it is not what happens to me that is the most important. It is how I approach it. If I am aware of who I am, if I accept who I am, if I keep working on who I am, if something like that happens, it is what it is, and it is not a judgment on me. Which brings me to the third temptation. This is the last of our 3 Lenten sermons on the meaning and trajectory of the 3 temptations that Jesus faced in the wilderness that gave him the authority to tell us what is. So going back to the temptation narrative, our third one is, then the devil took him to Jerusalem and placed him on the pinnacle of the temple, saying to him, if you are the Son of God, throw yourself down from here, for it is written, he will command his angels concerning you to protect you, and on their hands they will bear you up, so that you will not dash your foot against a stone. Jesus answered him, it is said, do not put the Lord God to the test. When the devil had finished every test, he departed from him until an opportune time. And we will encounter that opportune time before we get through the season of Lent, but for now he has departed. Still, Grace was entirely correct when she called this temptation the strangest of the 3. I mean, what are Jesus and Satan doing up there on the roof in the first place? What is the point of standing on the roof? God will command his angels to protect you, and you shall not dash your foot against a stone. Is this an invocation of magic or an affirmation of God's presence? What are they doing up there on the roof saying, just do it, Jesus, just do it. You're the Son of God. I titled this talk, Playing the God Card, because in a sense, that's what the adversary is asking Jesus to do. Go ahead, show everybody that you're really the Son of God. Show them that you are the real thing. And the way that they will see he's the real thing is that his action does not have a bad consequence. He can jump off a roof and not be killed, unlike the rest of us. However, the mere fact that this temptation really verges on the frivolous should clue us right away that there is a deep meaning that lies beneath its apparent silliness. There is a twist to all that is said in that temptation, which evokes what the serpent says to Eve way back in the garden. And that is, you will not die from eating the fruit. For God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. And Kirk is always quick to say that God lied because Eve ate it and she didn't die. Well, yes, she did. She just didn't die at that very minute. Again, there's this desire for the absolutely immediate cause and effect. But you see, the fact that Eve is spared an immediate effect gives her a reason to trust that the serpent is speaking truth to her, and that the good and the evil that she and Adam know all of a sudden is in any way reliable. But if you think about it, can anything that comes from an unreliable source be reliable? And so that particular twist in the garden is not that we know anything about good and evil. It is that we think we know good and evil because God's adversary told us so. Now, in his farewell discourse in John's Gospel, Jesus actually addresses this, and he says, "Nevertheless, I will tell you the truth. It is to your advantage that I go away. For if I do not go away, the advocate will not come to you. But if I go, I will send him to you. And when he comes, he will prove the world wrong about sin and righteousness and judgment." He will prove the world wrong about sin and righteousness and judgment. And so in some sense, what Jesus is able to send to us after his death is right mind, is the ability to think correctly about what sin and righteousness and judgment and all those things really are, that they are different than what the serpent told us. And there is a second echo of that in Hebrews, that Christ, having been offered once to bear the sins of many, will appear a second time, not to deal with sin, because that's already been dealt with, but to save those who are eagerly waiting for him. And that gives us one way into our parable about the fig tree, because the fig tree has not borne fruit for 3 years. Think about it. How long was Jesus with us? He was with us for 3 years, and we still didn't get it. And the gardener says, "Please, let me have one more year to see if that tree can bear fruit." And that is a hidden call to Jesus' followers to do the work of absorbing what Jesus has taught. Do the work that Jesus has called us to do, and that is bearing some kind of fruit. Meister Eckhart says that the fruit we are to bear is the fruit of God on this earth, that Jesus calls us to embody the divine as he has embodied the divine. So it goes back to that definition of sin that I brought up with you last week, that we think our sin is our misdeeds. We think that sin is our arrow missing the mark. We think that sin is something we do. We don't need a doctrine of sin to account for the fact that we do the wrong thing. We have the 3 poisons: greed, ignorance, and anger. Those are just endemic to the human condition. Greed, ignorance, and anger are endemic to consciousness. They're simply the obstacles we get. They are neither original nor unoriginal. They're simply there. What sin is that it is our separation from who we are. It is our separation from God. It is our separation from why we have been put here. Sin is being a tree, a fig tree that bears no fruit. Sin means we're not doing our job. And so we get back to the whole theme of temptation. And if the first temptation tested Jesus' power to turn natural resources to his own profitable ends, and the second tested his opportunity to go and take over all the political systems of this world and then do with them what he will, the third temptation is testing Jesus' very being. Who is he? Is he Superman, able to leap tall buildings with a single bound? Or is he fully human, like one of us, who, if he jumped off a roof, would find it very uncomfortable hitting the rocks below? Now let's push this a little further, because there's a really cool irony in all of this when Jesus looks at Satan and says, "You shall not put the Lord your God to the test." Because who do you think Satan is testing at that very moment? Even though Jesus has declared himself fully human, to be fully human is also to have access to being fully divine. And since we didn't sing, I will share this whole passage from Milton's Paradise Lost, in which Satan declares who he is, and it's really quite spectacular. Good morning. Satan, as we well know, was an angel in heaven. This is all folklore, but it's very extensive folklore, who falls from heaven and chooses to be fallen rather than to be a servant of God. And here he is explaining himself just as he touches ground. "Is this the region, the soil, the clime?" said then the lost archangel. "This is the seat that we must change for heaven? This mournful gloom for that celestial light? Be it so, since he who is now sovereign can dispose and bid what shall be right. Farthest from him is best, whom reason has equaled. Force has made supreme above his equals. Farewell, happy fields where joy forever dwells. Hail horrors, hail infernal world, and thou profoundest hell, receive thy new possessor, one who brings a mind not to be changed by place or time. The mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven. What matter where, if I be still the same? And what should I be than less than he whom thunder hath made greater? Here at last we shall be free. Almighty hath not built here for his envy, will not drive us hence. Here we may reign secure, and in my choice, to reign is worth ambition, though in hell. Better to reign in hell than to serve in heaven." Very interesting. Satan in Milton. Most everybody who reads Milton falls for Satan and finds him the far more interesting creature. But thanks to Tommy, I, who have been on a great hunt for the true nature of Satan, realizes that even as he's being awfully interesting, he is not speaking the truth at all. And he makes the statement that, it's all a matter of mind. Mind creates where it is. Mind can turn heaven into hell, hell into heaven. And any Buddhist would go, so that's news? Because at the heart of their teaching is that the world in which we live is a creation of our minds. So it would seem on the surface that Satan is being entirely correct, that it's all a matter of mind, but he misses something very important. And he says, well, I don't change. I am the same forever and ever and ever. And therefore, Satan entirely misses that the essential principle of the universe, the essential principle of God and life, and it is what it is that it is all a process of change. And to try and to hang on to my own conception of life or my own power or my own ideas is to, in a very, very deep way, be lost. To say I'm not going to change is the ultimate putting God to the test. And so because we've been looking, since I've brought up a Buddhist notion, we've been looking at similarities between Jesus' temptations and Gautama Buddha's temptations under the Bodhi tree. I give you his third, which, like Jesus and Satan on the rooftop, is on its surface as weird gets. So, in the third temptation, after the soon-to-be Buddha has faced down seduction and he has faced down an army of demons, Mara, his own deceivers, comes and says, I'm sorry, the seed of enlightenment rightly belongs to me, not to you, a mere mortal. And here are 10,000 demons to bear witness for my right to sit on that throne. What witness can you produce? And at that point, Gautama Buddha put his hand to the earth and touched the ground and said, the earth is my witness. And the earth answered, yes, I am his witness. And in that moment is the conviction that our humanity is dependent upon our oneness with this planet, with this earth that God gave to us as our place to be, the place from which we make our contribution to the working of the universe, the place where we find our true humanity, and the place where we find our true divinity. And this takes us right back to Ash Wednesday. And our Ash Wednesday service, as those of you who were there know, was the most joyous Ash Wednesday service I've ever been at, because we were able to say, remember that you are dust, and to dust you shall return. And the only thing any of us could say to that was, yes, that is who we are, because it is recognizing our dust that is our first step to God. We are creatures of the same world that Buddha called as witness. And believe it or not, in both our traditions, there is this desire to make the fully human into God, to bow down and worship what is fully human, when really what we are to do is not to bow down and worship what is fully human. It is to, through our life, our practice and example, to emulate it. And so, Jesus rejects special effects and superpowers in favor of full humanity, because only by being one of us can he truly show us the way, because God is the pure nature of things. Amen.
Amen.